or channel. Thank you. Okay, we are recording, but it didn't pop. We'll wait till, oh, well, that says 5 o'clock. All right. All right, it's 5 o'clock. We'll kick this thing off according to the screen.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. This is the July 2nd, 2025 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design. Present are Kelvin Yuji, Paula Summers, Deandra Sunner, and George Schneedenmuller, and myself, Joel Adrian. Present for planning staff, Eric Schultz and Allison Craig. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and the recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The board reserves the right to ask questions of staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, deny, or defer the application. Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design has the authority to do three things. 1, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. 2, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. 3, grant variances to the ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54.924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate, make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum are present and qualified to vote. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be a substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good. Character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. All right, so there we have it. Our first item, item A1 will have to be deferred since we do not have enough of the members present that were at that meeting present today. So do we need a motion?
Yeah.
So Kelvin, I think you can make that motion because you were present. So
Yeah, make a motion to defer.
and then Paul, I think you were there. Okay, so then all in favor of that motion? I in favor. Any opposed? Opposed, that motion is approved. Next item is item A2, which is review of the meeting minutes from June 4th, 2025. And we do have quorum present for that one. Are there any questions or changes to the minutes? If not, if there's a motion for approval. All right, so Calvin, motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And seconded by Deandra. All in favor of that motion? I in favor. Any opposed? That motion is approved as well. So now we'll get down to the real business. Should be item. Oh, item A3, because this was deferred from previous meeting. Item A3 is 100 Coastal Drive. That is on Daniel Island. The TMS number 275000185. It is zone DI-GO and request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 24 protected trees. Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get started, I just want to make it known, you have in front of you packets. Our agenda coordinator was very busy once again this month. You have a packet from the previous deferred meeting of the May 2nd or the June 4th, I'm sorry, meeting. At that particular meeting, we received 331 written comments through our Innovate site. You have a packet of July 1, actually it should be July 2, with 341 written comments, of which 339 comments are in opposition and 2 comments were submitted in support. I just want to let it be known that when she gets these compiled through that system, and also we receive oftentimes just emails come into staff members, we try and forward them on to her, and she compiles them and then sends them out to you. You should have received that email yesterday, I believe. So you can start to read through them, and I think we just don't have time to read every comment into public record. But so with that said, we'll move on here. As you note, you read 24 protected trees. I will explain why the request can be modified to 21 protected trees. This is the application submitted by HP 2000 DI LLC, the applicant being Megan Smith. This is their letter, which is very detailed, giving you some background, going through each point of the hardship test, exhibits, graphics. And of course, signed by, I believe, their legal counsel. This is the property as we see it today. I'll get into some history about Parcel K as it's known amongst staff. I'll show you a graphic why it is Parcel K, but they've done a series of property line adjustments over the past several months, maybe even a year and a half, 2 years. But this is the present form. They're going through a process now to finalize another plat. But as you can see, our existing configuration. And then you see different dotted lines in order for 911 to be successful, even though they're private drives. In some cases, they have to take on a name in order for emergency response to get to a particular address. So that's where what you see quick on there is a lot of street names. I'll show you this photo. This is just taken, this is the latest Google Earth. But we're dealing with the block, if you will, and I'll describe how that block was created against Daniel Allen Drive. And you can see that behind it is a alley, if you will, 2 rows of live oaks. They're evergreen in nature throughout their growing season. And then you can see the shadows of the 24 willow oaks that exist on a berm. And of course, Google flies during winter, so they're defoliated in this image. Here's a street view. Again, this is from Google Street. This is, they're being protected during a phase of the entire whole project, if you will. This is my shot taken just a couple weeks ago, standing in Daniel Allen Drive, heading into the mainland of Daniel Allen, if you will, downtown, or Seven Farms Drive. This is a shot from the backside. I'm standing in what will be a street dedicated to the public, and then there's a parking lot that was kind of reconfigured, and then the row of trees sitting on top of the berm. This is the exhibit showing X's over those trees and its relationship to the existing parking lot. I'll get into some detail about, again, how this block was created. This is a close-up. I've measured the trees that are 23 or 22 inches in diameter, just to confirm that they are not grand. So under our ordinance, any tree slated for multifamily development, or actually with the DI-GO zoning, 8 inches in diameter or greater is protected. And then, of course, if it becomes equal to or greater than 24 inches in diameter, it then is classified as grand tree. So we're dealing with just protected trees in this case. This is the layout of the proposed multifamily. Now, they look like single-family houses. They are single-family attached units, but it's going to remain one lot of record, so it's going to be a horizontal regime, or maybe even for rent. You know, if it's a horizontal regime, each unit can be sold and take on a TMS number, or it can just be a for rent product. But the configuration or the housing type chosen by the developer in this case is a single family attached unit with a private drive with the parking accessed at the rear of each of the units, and the units facing onto the public realm, public street. This is an overlay of the existing berm with the trees sitting on that berm and how it relates to the layout. This block, presently the angled parking due north of this single family attached project does not exist. So they plan to head to that property line is back in the existing parking lot a little bit so they can create that angled parking. The city over time has learned that visitor parking is very crucial to these type of communities, neighborhoods. If one individual has a party, graduation party, funeral, whatever it may be, to park in that alley in their garage would not work. So they're providing on-street parking adjacent to the project, additional on-street parking. The parallel north of the angle parking exists against the alley of Live Oak. These are photos submitted by the applicant. They numbered each tree. As you can see, they weren't planted exactly on top of the berm. They were planted on kind of the side slope of the berm, and have taken on their growth habits based on their planting proximities. I can't recall, I've been here 25 years. I recall the berm being placed because I watched Blackball corporate headquarters as well as the Charleston battery facility get built. I can't remember if there was additional shrubs or it was just mulch or there was Asiatic jasmine in there or what have you, but the shade is thick enough today that really nothing can survive. Another shot. So they have obviously made a visit to the Daniel Allen Architectural Review Board. That body has given conceptual approval. This is just some documentation of that process with conditions, obviously. And then they've also made a trip to the city's board of design review board, and it's received approval at the first trip, the conceptual, and with comments, conditions. This is an exhibit that they provided that kind of shows the very early landscape plan that would be further developed as the project moves through technical review and also through design review board. Some images of the proposed product, single family attached, once again, raised on either a small raised building pad, most likely to meet flood requirements, and then some steps, front stoops addressing a multi-use path, which I'll talk about briefly, that's going to be built adjacent to Daniel Allen Drive. And then the overall development, I'll kind of get into this in the city slides, but this shows the vision for the basically redevelopment of Parcel K. Obviously, there was a huge value in the office building, but with the battery stadium going dark and there is no interest to create another team or what have you. Parcel K was available for redevelopment. So with that said, I'll get into city slides. So parcel K, Daniel Allen Master Plan, created, took the 4,000 acre island and created different parcels and assigned different residential densities to each parcel. Parcel K actually in the master plan had 0 residential units assigned to it, but the PUD allows the Daniel Allen Company to shift units and reallocate units. You know, it was just a stab in the dark, you know, when you're working with wetlands and trees and natural features and what have you. You wouldn't yield all those units. And obviously the Daniel Allen Master Plan was approved with a maximum number of units. So through a process I'm not too familiar with, they reallocated units to allow the residential to occur once the stadium went dark and what have you. So in my opinion, it's kind of like its own district becoming one of its own, because it's not really on the main body of Daniel Allen. But this is what existed minus the professional soccer facility, but a massive 3-story office building was constructed. It had huge field of parking associated with it. And that accommodated not only the office use, but the stadium use as well. So in order to get to the point that they're at and to create this block, if you will, they had to present plans to the city, the technical review committee, in which they had several trips to, and then this concept plan had to receive a review by the planning commission. So it went to the planning commission and they came up with a land use plan. This is the purple areas are slated for residual to be developed, parcels to be developed. They knew they had a multifamily tenant going in the center. And then of course the office was maybe dark or partially vacated, and they were seeking new tenants and what have you. Each parcel neighborhood is required to have a focal point park. So when they started to think about the requirement for that, this shows in purple here. They wanted to take advantage of the waterfront, the Oil Creek waterfront, but then they learned and studied that they'd also take advantage of that existing double row of live oak and incorporate that into the focal point park. So you can see this is very early on, very conceptual. There's no, it can move around. I underline conceptual, but it kind of sets up the framework for more technical review and further development. Here's the lot lines, if you will, starting to take shape over top. They totally reoriented the parking field for the office. So you can see that it's angled to that red line. They basically made it almost perpendicular, if you will, to the back north side of the office building, which got into a treed area, and it went through a process to remove a few trees, reorganize some ponds. Then the center area is primarily where the soccer field is or was, and that's the multifamily. Far left where the practice soccer field is, that's a phase 1 of another single family attached product under construction. And then in order to have this work with public access, they created this street network, if you will, utilizing almost the exact same private driveway access points, but converting them to streets, and then creating that that linear park, if you will, that focal point park in the center with the angled parking, and then of course some residual lands against the marsh. And they actually built an access path and a dock on the creek. But this kind of shows how their conceptual master plan, if you will, was coming into shape and in relationship to the existing conditions. So I just want to point this out that, you know, it's kind of unusual that both these rows of trees were planted. This was agricultural land opened in 1994 when the master plan was adopted. And so they kind of planned specifically around these 2 rows of trees to be part of that focal point park. This is interesting. I went back, and sorry that they're blurry, but the site that I used, 1994, there was just a farm road that came over the creek, dirt road, and you can kind of see that little hook, if you will, on the bottom. That hook exists where the original sales center for Daniel Allen, that loop road, that was the original sales center for Daniel Allen. Matter of fact, that site is approved for a mini inn. A hospitality facility will be built there. It went through the whole process. And so again, buildings will be pretty much up close to the road there. That center live oak will be worked around. That's 2015, the trees. Oh, I just wanted to note that, the trees were probably planted at 2.5-inch caliber. DRB, I don't think existed in 1999, 2000, 2001. So there was no DRB required. So with that massive parking field, the developer at the time chose to place some excess soil there and plant trees to screen the parking. We had no real buffer on Daniel Allen Drive required. And so they just did that back then. So they're starting to grow and their crowns are starting to maybe touch one another. And today I'd say they're fully, and now they're probably working against one another, just like trees in a forest. They'll start to take turns and crooks and start to search for light and what have you. And actually some internal branches will probably start to die back due to lack of light, but they're. So this is where we're at with the platting process. I don't sit on the plat review committee, better known as PRC, but I went to their file, and as of the most recent review, the block, if you will, the new parcel K8 is 1.36 acres. And based on our zoning ordinance, we view this as multifamily. Of course, the base zoning is DIGO. So you would take, the rule says that you're to maintain 15 protected trees post-development if you have trees on the site. So in this case, 1.36, I didn't see any easements, so it's the gross acreage times 15 are to be maintained. So it ends up being 20.6 trees, and we round up in zoning, so 21 trees. So that's where I'm modifying the application to 21 trees. There's 24 on site, including 2 palms. If they came to the city yesterday or today and asked, I want to remove 3 trees, we would have been able to permit those trees for removal because they were maintaining 21 on site. So with that said, this is just I threw this in. This is another project going on that's going to change Daniel Allen Drive in some means. Is that the first bridge as you cross off Thomas Island onto Daniel Island is not the safest. So there is a grant that the city's working with to build a pedestrian bike path coming off of Thomas Island. It will actually go over marsh in a boardwalk configuration and then rejoin up with Daniel Allen Drive, have a pedestrian crosswalk in which the inn or the hotel will tie into. And then that puts you on the north side, and the city's going to build that walk up to Coastal Drive. So that gray area, you'll come across their first new street across the frontage of this project, and then the city project terminates at Coastal Drive, that second street there. So I just wanted to. So with that said, I looked at the 4 points pretty hard of the hardship test, and I believe their argument, and in my opinion, the city's opinion, that it's met. So city approves recommendation to approve with 105 caliber inches of native canopy trees on site in the form of 10 3-inch caliber cathedral or high-rise live oaks across the frontage adjacent to Daniel Allen Drive. The residual inches planted on the site elsewhere. must transplant the 2 existing sable palmettos on site. And of course, if they don't survive the transplant, the landscape plan would just note that new palm trees are planted. Must provide a landscape plan for both TRC, Technical Review Committee, and the DRB, Design Review Board, for review and approval. And they must build a section of multi-use path from the Beresford Creek Bridge to Coastal Drive as per a previously approved plan and city discussions. So with that said, that's
All right.
where would you like me to land on the overall site plan?
Be a good place to start, and then we'll get the applicant. So I'll start the typical procedure. Is there anybody present that is opposed to the application? All right. The applicant is present.
Yes.
And would you like to be heard?
Good evening. My name is Andy Barfield. I'm Chief Development Officer at Boulder Properties. And I was going to spend a lot of time describing, but Mr. Schultz did such a great job of that. So I'm going to just jump right in. We invested in this property back in 2019. And as you saw in the images, it was a vacant parking lot. It was a vacant office building and a vacant stadium. And so we were very intentional about building something special. We continue to be intentional about that. And so I think it's important to note that not only has the office been completely renovated and released, the majority of the residential has been built, and depending on tonight, and we appreciate the approval from staff, that will round out what's left of the residential master plan. But also I think it's important to note for you all that we've planted over 800 trees. We've saved 500 trees. And so not only with that, we have increased the canopy at least 2x. And so every time we walk into these developments, including tonight, the landscape plan, if you were to count the trees, it's over 50 trees. And so, saving, preserving the trees that we can and planting more has been critical since day one for us. And it continues to be critical, and it will be critical. So we've been a long-term investor. We've been in Charleston for over 20 plus years. And Knoll Creek Village is just what we're focused on right now. And I think we're really creating something special for the community. So hopefully if you guys get a chance to go out and take a look at it, we think we've done something pretty special. I'm going to turn it over to Megan. She's our civil engineer. She can address some of the high-level technical pieces, and then we can obviously answer questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Smith. I'm with LJA. I'm the project engineer of record. Just wanted to quickly give a statement, basically from the technical aspect. There's several constraints and limitations, as you can see, related to the development of this property, including conflicts with the building footprint as well as some of the grading. The berm specifically is about 2 to 2.5 feet high in the air. The plant trees are currently on the sides and towards the top of the berm. And in order to efficiently grade and also drain the property, drain the existing buildings and tie in with like ADA to that new sidewalk that the city is putting in, we would really need to grade the entire area of that site and remove that berm, which unfortunately does affect those trees. However, we also have a lot of the space taken up by the actual building footprints. This, as you can see, shows the 20-foot build-to line that the Daniel Allen PUD requires. And so we are forced to put our buildings at a certain spot, and 90% of those trees are within that footprint. Other than that, it's basically just the grading and the footprints that are guiding this request.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else present that is wanting to speak that's in favor of the application? Then we'll go to gentleman raise his hand back there. So he was opposed. We'll start with anybody in opposition. And you're first batter up.
Hello there, thank you. My name's Chris Yeagle. I live on Daniel Island at 183 Brady Street. As I look at the criteria, I have some concerns about them. For criteria A, extraordinary and exceptional conditions. All of Daniel Island has been developed over some point in time as farms, as whatever, but if you explore all of Daniel Island, there are berms, there are ditches, there's everything else. This berm has been here for multiple decades. It was there before they purchased the property. It's as static as any other, thing that was there when they had to plant roads and do other stuff, and decide where to build homes. So, I really look at it as it is man-made, but it was there long enough that it's fairly static. So I feel like they don't meet that requirement. For criteria B, conditions that don't apply to other property in the vicinities. They highlight that this is a unique parcel. But really that there's a lot that does distinguish it from other parcels. It can be seen from kind of everywhere. And they've sort of known the limits of what this is from when they bought it. I mean, this is a well-known developer. They've been up here many times. They knew it was planted before they did it. They knew they'd be up here asking to tear down those trees. The roads were there before they bought the property as well. All they did was dedicate private driveways. So these really aren't limitations that they didn't know about in advance. For criteria C, does it unreasonably restrict the use of the property? They highlight, the engineer just highlighted that they've got to level this. They basically have to get rid of the trees to build something. In their own application, they actually, defined it as market feasibility thresholds. This is a profitability issue. They could build half the units. It's not profitable to. They have to build them all, or they want to build them all. But they could easily build that back half without tearing down the front. And then for variance criteria D, will it affect the greater good? I think part of the reason you saw a lot of objection from our neighborhood is, as they described in B, this is a very unique site. It's an island surrounded by marsh. I mean, everyone from St. Thomas Island looks at it. All of Daniel Island looks at it. It's not just the people driving by, it's all the people on the marsh, it's the paths. So I do think whatever is built there, eliminating that, what they described as a natural berm, that berm was put there to basically hide something that was of far lower stature than the buildings that already exist. So I just think that you're really going to see, everyone's going to be just looking at buildings and not and more of the buildings that already exist, and even what they just built. So I think it really will impact sort of the neighborhood character. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before the next item, I failed to mention this, and I think he's getting prepared to speak, but we did receive this letter from the Daniel Island Neighborhood Association, which you all have a copy of. I think Christina sent it out early. I hope I forget exactly when we received it, but
Maybe.
okay.
This is taller than I am. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board. Thank you for your service. My name is Jared Brooks. I've been on Daniel Island for 21 years. And I currently serve as the Daniel Island Neighborhood Association president. And I'm also the Berkeley County Councilman for Daniel Island and some of the surrounding area. My job for most of my career has been in the franchising sector, and part of that job was managing our commercial real estate development and portfolio. When I was campaigning, I spent a lot of time going door to door, and during early voting, I took 2 weeks off of work and stood in front of the library. I looked like Forrest Gump out front on a bench, but I got to talk to a lot of people. And no matter who I was talking to, whether it was residents or commercial developers, I had the same answer for how do I feel about development. And I ran on the notion that we need to preserve our quality of life. And to me, that means development and conservation and preservation have to go hand in hand. They have to find some way to coexist in order to preserve that. Just to orient the board a little bit, I do have a handout, Mr. Chairman. May I approach?
Sure.
Thanks. I think Eric did a wonderful job orienting you to the site, but just to point out a couple of things. The area that you see in red is the area in question. It is the historic entrance to Daniel Island for the last 250 or 300 years. Before exit 24 was built off of 526, as we pointed out to you earlier, there was a dirt farm road that came across to Daniel Island. And so as you come across that first bridge, this row of trees that you see on page 2, very similar to Eric's picture, is literally the first thing you see when you come onto Daniel Island. If you look at the Daniel Island building criteria, it goes on for pages and pages about the number of trees you have to plant and how many you have to plant. And so there's a huge emphasis by the Daniel Island Development Company and the ARP and those others that approve our plans about trees. So we're very sensitive to what happens when you get rid of trees, particularly in a strategic area like the main rear entrance to Daniel Island. I want to remind you too that the Daniel Island Neighborhood Association is the only voice that is approved by the city of Charleston to represent all of Daniel Island. I think in some of the documents that the applicant has submitted to you, and I have my own copy here, that it would infer that because the Daniel Island ARB and other related entities approved this, that they were speaking on behalf of the residents. And I just want to tell you that's just not so. I think we've had a good working relationship with Holder Properties and particularly this development, myself, as well as the Daniel Island Neighborhood Association. In fact, in this particular Noel Creek development, we actually worked with Holder to help them seek a variance for some of the things that they were trying to accomplish. Of course, every iteration that we have ever seen are the ones on the subsequent pages. You can see on page 3, the TRC document dated approved 9/25/24. Then the pages that follow, every public document that we've ever seen while we were supporting Noel Creek did not show the removal of these trees along Daniel Island Drive that are in question until last month's BZA meeting. So we were under the impression that there was not going to be significant development along these protected tree lines. We were always under the impression that it would be slightly behind that. Daniel Island residents are not asking that the applicant not build these townhomes. We're asking build them not on top of these trees, the first thing you see when you come onto Daniel Island. There may be other opportunities on the property that these entitlements could end up going. So I know that there is a variance test, and just to run through our thoughts on this, number 1, extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the site. There are no extraordinary conditions pertaining to this site. The applicant in its documents to you argue that physical, regulatory, and historic development constraints centered around the size, streets, a man-made berm, and then an excruciating detail of market research is what makes this exceptional. I think this is a false narrative. This development started off as 37 acres. This parcel in particular started off as 20 acres. And so they started with a blank slate, the developer did. And so when we start talking about physical, regulatory, and historical constraints, these are constraints that the developer brought among themselves and built streets and other things that have to be designed around. All these limitations were known. In our opinion, it's a problem of the developer's own making. Where I grew up, we call it a self-licking ice cream. It just is, you don't get to come in front of this board and be authentic about it and say, this didn't exist and we didn't know about it when there was a blank slate that the developer started with. But number 2, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. Again, I want you to remember the applicant has had complete control of this entire property. The applicant cites three things in their document to you. Number one, that the site's configuration limits it. The site was configured by the applicant. This is what was left by design, whether on purpose or accident. The second thing that the applicant will cite in relation to this particular condition is extraordinary extent of public street frontage. I think the way I read this is that there is a long, in their opinion, streetscape that fronts these 24 townhomes. I would like to call your attention to two other places that I'm aware of on Daniel Island where similar conditions exist. One is the Pierce Street townhomes, which I'm happy to pull up and show you if we need to. And further up Daniel Island Drive in the Smythe Park area, there are another set of townhomes that are at least this voluminous, if not more. So I think the arguments for this particular section begin to fall apart. The third that's presented to you argument is an atypical vegetative conditions. What we're talking about is a man-made berm with asymmetrically planted trees. I don't know that it matters to residents of Daniel Island or to this board how the berm and the trees got there. They were originally planted because there was a 3 or 4 story stadium back there that needed a little bit of shielding. Now there's hundreds of rental properties that are 3 and 4 stories high that need the same shielding for the same reasons. These conditions were known in advance and avoidable by the developer. The third point that I know that is in front of you is that the application of the ordinance would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict use of the property. Again, the applicant writes in their rebuttal to you that the concentration of protected trees within a constrained and artificial berm combined with zoning form requirements and utility design needs make the ordinance unreasonable. The next paragraph cites internal studies that they would have you think are not as self-serving. And it relates to floor plans and vehicular circulation, compatibility, and drainage. Again, this is a master planned parcel. 20 acres on this particular one, 37 on the whole thing. We believe that these are self-made problems, and I'd like to speak to that in the very end, how I think we got here. The other thing that if I were this board, I would pressure the applicant about alternatives. Where else could these 24 entitlements go that are being moved from another development that was at the front of Daniel Island last year? Megan mentioned in her comments about the grading and the drainage. Currently, that area drains just fine. And so there may be something that wasn't explained as well to me, but that area is not in search of a new drainage plan under the current conditions. Lastly, the authorization of the variance will not be detrimental to the public good or the character of Daniel Island. And I think this is where the residents' argument really shines. With over 700 comments between the last BZA meeting and this one, admittedly, some may be repetitive. And the residents did not challenge any other aspect of this 37-acre, several hundred rental property development. There was I agree with the developer. Many of the things here have been done really well. What we're asking is don't let this be the first thing that you see as you come onto Daniel Island, because that does not represent us. That does not represent what's in our covenants and restrictions. I believe that despite some effort, there's been some disingenuous engagement on behalf of the developer. The package that you're holding in front of you was filed and given to you before the community engagement meeting was held. And so the meeting that was held was not to get feedback from residents, it was to explain what they were doing. That doesn't pass the smell test with me. The other thing that is disingenuous to me are the timing of these meetings. The applicant has consistently held meetings such as this just before, just after a holiday. If I have my conspiracy theory hat on, it's so that there will be less community engagement relative to it. You heard Eric speak earlier, and I'm about to my end. I want you to close your eyes and imagine coming over the bridge onto Daniel Island. To the right of you is going to be a large boutique hotel. It will scale 4 stories, I believe. And so when you compare that with 3 stories here, plus the roof line, it will look like you are traveling through a gauntlet of buildings. And that's why these trees are needed. We hope that the developer will find another place to use the entitlements, which brings me to a good question. Why are we here? When you look at the various public iterations that were given to the TRC and BZA of what this development was going to look like, if you look at those and the things that I supported, this is not what's before you now. I would have had a different answer had I known. I believe that the developer is trying to bring entitlements over from another development, and that this is an afterthought. It has all the earmarks of an afterthought. This wasn't designed to go here the way it was. Otherwise, these are smart, intelligent people with a big company and lots of resources. They would have designed this in a way that probably didn't have to come in front of you if this wasn't an afterthought. So the trees and the functions that they serve for flood protection and beauty and habitat and noise attenuation and visual buffer cannot come in front of you and represent themselves today. That's up to me and some other people in this room, and it falls as a heavy burden on all of your shoulders. I hope you'll keep in mind as you have your deliberations tonight about the many Daniel Island residents that would love to see these 24 townhomes built, just not exactly where it's planned. I'd be happy to entertain any questions from the board.
Thank you. I think what we'll do is hear from everybody that's opposed and allow the applicant to rebut, and then we'll start with our engagement unless there's immediate questions that anybody has right now.
I appreciate your time
Thank you.
very much.
Anybody else like to speak that is opposed? We'll go back to the applicant.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Actually, Jared and I have spoke on numerous occasions over the years, so I appreciate that he thinks we're intelligent. That's a good thing. I would say there's a couple of things. One, quality of life. I mean, I think if you were to look at our development, one, we've created a public park. We've accessed the water with a public dock. We're creating walking trails. We've actually improved stormwater mitigation by building multiple bioretention ponds throughout the property. So the drainage that goes into Beresford and Noah Creek have been improved drastically. So from a wildlife and just an engagement of the community, I think we have done great things there. So I think quality of life has been improved. It's been improved. If it was left as a vacant office building, a 1,300 space parking lot, and an abandoned stadium, I don't think that contributes to quality of life. Constraints. One of the major constraints with this property is the alley. There are multiple beautiful live oaks. We were very intentional about keeping those live oaks. That addresses the water. It creates a great access for the property. And so with that creates the constraint as well as DI Drive and our 2 adjacent drives. And so we always intended to do something up front. It was never our intention to leave a parking lot as our front door. And so we are not a Walmart. Excuse me, Walmart, if anybody likes Walmart, but we are not a Walmart. We always wanted to build something up front to address our front door. And right now, an asphalt parking lot is not a great front door, nor are berms that you cannot see the development. People drive by. We're trying to create a buzz where we bring people in. We don't want to reject them. So we're trying to activate our parks, our docks, et cetera. So that is very important to us, but the alley was a major constraint. So I think that we have to acknowledge that. And then ultimately, it's just the amount of green space. We've improved the green space. We've activated an office building. We're inviting people into our ground floor. You can come in and work on our office building in the ground floor. We've got a market inside. So I think those are all things that are improving the community. But at the end of the day, we have planted 800 trees in here. We will continue to do that. They're very important to us. I do think the berm and ultimately the trees are it's going to stunt their growth. They're planted on the side of a hill. And so as those trees grow, and I think Eric did a great job of explaining that, they will eventually fall. They will eventually start to cannibalize one another. And so we think responsible planting. So that's why you look at our landscape plan. We agree this is the back door, but we want to make it look like a front door. That's important to us. So we want to build something that when people come on to Daniel Island, they're proud. They're proud of what they see. And right now, an asphalt parking lot is not that. So hopefully that addresses those questions.
All right, then we are going to close the application to the public at this point, and it will be open to the board to discuss and ask questions of the applicant. And so I would, if you can, sorry, if we walk back. And so I'll just start real quick. If the opposition is stating that you had control over the whole 37 acres and this is an afterthought, can you talk to us? Like, I'm sure there has been discussions, Daniel Island Company with City of Charleston, on how these different areas were laid out.
Sure.
And what control did you have over that? And if you could address those.
Sure. It was 2 parcels. We assembled those 2 parcels. And then we want to, because like what Eric showed with the parking lots, the orientation of the parking lots was very odd relative to the office building. Those parking lots were built there for a stadium. And so the way that they address the stadium, with the stadium being vacant and obviously, re-envisioned of what it was going to be. So, I would say, yes, there are 2 entry points. We maintain those entry points. We did not change the way that you enter the site. And all of that honestly works on an axis, like I said, the alley and then the vertical axis. And so right now the horizontal axis is in. The alley is there, it connects to the dock, it walks right into our front door of our office building. There is a vertical axis that we are trying to create to the street. And so the only way to do that as part of the built environment, what we're trying to do is to invite people in, both pedestrian and vehicular. And so that's why we did that. And so there is a master plan there, and it's out there that says future development here. We didn't know exactly how this was all going to pan out from day one. It is an evolution. It's an evolution, but we always knew that we just didn't want a parking lot as our front door. So we had multiple master planners, Sotil, Perkins and Will, Ginsler, all really respectable firms that come in and help us figure out the best way to handle this. And ultimately it landed on where we are today.
Okay. Second, Daniel Island's build to line. I
Yes.
think that's an important piece that wasn't mentioned from the opposition. But if we could, so their build to line is just 20 feet,
20 feet,
right
that's
from the
correct.
front property line,
That's correct.
within 5 feet probably forward or behind.
That's 20 feet. That's
Massing of main mass of the building. So
That's exactly right.
variance options for that to push the buildings 40 feet off of that front property line and reposition things. I think my second question leading to that would be, I think that it was mentioned that these parking spaces here were guests for this.
That's correct.
This development. If those aren't required, then it seems like this could shift and then these units can actually really enjoy the alley. And then there are spaces on the other side I keep seeing that look like gaming spaces. Are those dedicated to the office building or are those dedicated to some other count?
Yeah, great question. The parking spaces around the alley are intended for public use. We want people to come and enjoy the green space, the dock, et cetera. So that was the intent, and it remains the intent. We studied your question, because we said, even if we push the buildings farther north, up to the road, and essentially took out all that parking, you're still going to impact those trees. You're still going to have a berm that was built back in the early 2000s to essentially cover a parking lot. So even when you do that, it still does not fit. And yes, we were adhering to DI's own ordinance. It requires a 20-foot setback on your build to line. So we did explore that.
Did you did you look at if and I understand numbers of units are very important. But if it was pushed, this berm is kind of following that road.
That's right.
So if it was pushed, could the first 5 trees in the front, left here and the last 5 trees over there remain if the building shifted and maybe 3 units come off and something is addressed so that the request then is reduced?
We looked at it 100 different ways. Look, there's multiple healthy big trees that we've saved on this property, and they really contribute to the property. We don't deny that, and we want to do that. Here, it doesn't work. And yes, you're right. In fact, we're entitled for 30 units. We're only building 24. So we're not even building what we're entitled for. But there is a fine line when you're building, and these are very nice. We're only going to fit 24, but you've got to have 24 to be able to make the number work. You have to be able to make it work. And 24 is our threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is that landscape plan? Somewhere, I think. If anybody else has questions.
Another question.
Sure.
Did you explore maybe just keeping that first row of trees and then they wouldn't, in theory, as they continue to grow, wouldn't maybe fully cannibalize themselves, as you said?
We did. A couple problems. One, they're planted on the side of a berm. So you've got to take a portion of that berm to get to your build-to line, right? So ultimately, we would have to remove a portion of that berm. So we'd have essentially a half of a berm up next to a building. But what's important is creating the Daniel Island Trail along the front of it. That is important to us. And so we want pedestrian thoroughfare. We want people on bikes. And so to really truly be able to do that and do it right with this right stormwater and the additional plantings that we're going to do, we have to level that out so that we can create the grade for people. Because right now, people are having to walk up on the berm. It's not ADA acceptable. And they're having to walk. That's where you go when you're walking along DI Drive right now.
Do you know your what's your FFE of the townhomes? Because they're raised up a little bit.
They're raised, 2 feet. So for insurance purposes, I think 13 is where we need to be. And so we do raise those up by code. There's reason for that.
So how's that in relation to the berm?
To the berm, it's probably halfway up the berm, maybe.
So the sidewalk along the front isn't being required by Daniel Island, but it's part of your plan. Because I know right now, there's a sidewalk along
city
Conrad
project.
Ferry.
The city project. This project, I don't know the history. Maybe the local Berkeley County rep knows a little more about it. I'm not sure, but I think a unfortunate incident happened on the bridge. I drive by and I see some flowers or something, so it's a safety issue. We had obviously the Daniel Island Master Plan calls out for trails and connectivity and what have you. So when the Benefit Focus project went a number of years ago, they built their path up to the Beresford Creek Bridge, just shy of it. And then, of course, that bridge went in disrepair, so it was time to replace. So the timing and then this incident and grant money. So this is connecting Thomas Island to Daniel Island. It goes out over the marsh, south of the bridge, then hits the right of way. So the city's building the piece across the front of their future townhomes. They're going to tie their scoops and front doors into it.
So I can say I love the idea of the sidewalk. I lived on Daniel Island from 2000 to 2014 and never went that way, but always went the other way. I can say that my son has already enjoyed your fishing dock.
Oh, good.
Yeah, after school at BE, walk down, throw a line in. Okay, and I saw that the original development of all that. I think this plan is important. I think the city's approval conditions are important. I understand that if the sidewalk goes in, grading, what was mentioned earlier, and that it would potentially start to get into some of those trees. I'm looking at if this were to be the replanting plan, there's 8 large canopy trees, live oaks, something that are gonna go back in the front, which will certainly help to mitigate the height of those units on that entry. So I don't, if if you can't shove it back, keep those oaks. It was certainly land that was intended to be developed and not just be a parking lot after the reconfiguration.
I mean, I think the applicant meets the hardship test that we're looking for. I would say that this development is actually reminds me of a lot of the rest of Daniel Island and the in-town part. I mean, this is the rear entrance. I think it's in keeping with the design of Daniel Island. I can appreciate the opposition. I think sometimes we can get emotional and get attached to things that have been there, but to Eric's point, there was never a buffer or a berm. The trees are planted on the sides. I think the applicant makes a good argument. Eric, as you're driving into Daniel Island past this site, and then there's another adjacent empty development field on the left.
That's no longer empty.
Okay, I haven't been out there in a
That's
while. I mean, I've been
apartments.
to
No,
this area.
So again, that was a benefit focus. That was master planned for, I think, 4 very large office buildings.
Mhm.
The pads were set. The first building was built back up against, I can't remember. It used to be Health Source where you enter into the hotels and stuff back there. Again, the economy, whatever you want to call it, that went totally different as well. So Woodfield Developments currently, that used to be some of the practice fields for, I think, schools, as well as maybe the Blackball Battery or the Charleston Battery and what have you. And that's all been converted to apartments now.
Yes, I don't know if anybody was on the board back when. So there's 2 hotels. You come off of 526 and one of them's new. I don't know if it's a Home 2 or it's a Home 2. Can't remember the number of grand trees that were approved to be removed off of that site for that hotel to show up.
We did not develop that.
No, but I, you know, I mean, that was something that was done. I know it is tough development. It's tough. You hate to see stuff removed, but the vision of, but you know, if you go back to that 05 photo where there was the 91 or 95 and 05 photo, and those trees were, you know, this tall. I remember driving off 526 and all those pine trees when you're coming from Mount Pleasant over the river and you shoot off on Daniel Island. I was there when they planted those daggone pine trees and they were, you know, 3 feet tall. And then I think our friend in the back had to go and chop some down because they grew and they started, you know, growing into each other too much. So I feel like, you know, this will mature and this will be a positive. Just like I used to live on Pierce Street in one of those townhouses right across from the pool. And I remember what that looked like before those townhouses showed up. And look at the trees that were saved, the trees that remained and how they grew, trees here that would be planted. I personally feel like it's appropriate.
Will it also be encourage traffic to slow with more of the buildings being closer to the street with the sidewalk and a little bit?
I have a comment, maybe more for the board than the public, but I think one of the points that's consistent throughout the opposition is that if we remove those trees, it does change the character of the site significantly, which is item number 4 on the variance test. You know, they're mature willow oaks, they are starting to grow together, but they do a great job of screening that property. And if I was a concerned resident, I wonder if instead, you know, in the city recommendation, they have a number of inches that need to be planted. If we supported this, I would maybe add a requirement that those trees at the front are a certain size so that it does have a little bit maturity.
Want to bring those conditions up? So I think he had,
Cause like, you know,
3
two,
But it was 3 inch
was
caliper,
3
maybe.
inches.
So they're more substantial at planting.
Okay, so you've got 3 inch.
versus an inch and a half. And,
2.5.
2.5, 2.5. So obviously any development's going to change character of the district. I remember when there wasn't a tennis center on Daniel Island. I don't think anybody complains about the tennis center being on Daniel Island. There was no Publix. And then there was a Publix, and then there was no Publix again, but Publix is coming back. You know, so y'all are enjoying what I had to have to drive over to Long Point Road, go to Harris Teeter, drive back home. So I think that, you know, the thought is, yes, there would be an immediate change to the district, but is it harming it? And I'd say no, because it's going back in a way that's consistent with the rest of the development of the island.
Is there an existing median in the street?
There is not.
No.
There's not, no.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Tell me you're quiet.
Great, thank you.
Are there any questions of anything? Is there anybody ready to make a motion? It has to be made at some point. So I'll say, my initial is listening through everything, you know, and take the applicant at their word that they did study shifting and changing and removing. And if that still doesn't save the trees, then, which would also, if they shift those buildings, require them to get a variance from BZA-Z and then get that approved also by Daniel Island, because they would be off of that 20-foot build-to line, which is consistent on all properties, I think, except for, that might even be on Captain's Island. But, so I think that my concern was, hey, if they can be shifted, keep this, still develop, wonderful, but it doesn't appear that works. So I think providing the parking along the alley, another good move.
I think upping the inches maybe on those 10 trees.
Yeah,
Point.
that's kind of what I was getting at. I
Yes,
think
sir.
it's gonna be, maybe the developer has a thought on it. Looking at the concept plan, I was trying to count canopy trees, and it might be hard to fit 105 inches on that site. If those were 4, 5, or 6 inch trees, that helps with that requirement. And I think it also would help some residents get on board with it, you know. And somebody made a good point too about, you know, they are starting to get a little crowded in there too. You know, willow oaks, they don't live as, they're not live oaks. So yeah, I think increasing that caliper size of maybe just the 10 on the frontage would be a good idea.
The motion can include that change, so.
I'm not sure if I heard that at this board, but I did hear sometime about when you're planting trees, the size matters, and like the larger trees don't survive as long or something.
It grows quickly, I think is what it is.
But it takes a larger caliber tree longer to establish. It depends on whether it's a container grown tree or a field grown. I don't know if the true verdict is out, but a younger tree, right conditions, right water, it establishes much quicker than maybe an older, larger tree.
I mean, just for the residential neighborhood in Daniel Island, yeah, I think you're required to put 2 6-inch caliber trees in your front yard. And so, you know, I can certainly see if those first 10 or 6-inch calipers, you're looking at a tree that's 18 feet or so at least at planting.
Eric, where was the 105-inch figure calculated?
It's
So that's 21, should be 21 and 2.5 inch, two 2.5 inch trees per protected tree removed.
yes. 5
What the ordinance
per tree.
requires.
Yeah, inches per tree. That's right. Any other questions?
Are you gonna suggest a change to item 1? Or you're happy with?
I'd bump it up to. I mean, yeah, they do.
6 inches.
I'd say 6 inches.
10 6-inch trees.
Is there a warranty that the Daniel Island requires that maybe we ensure? Or this,
The ordinance specifies that we go back in a year and inspect with mitigation trees. It's gonna be highly visible. They're gonna want them to be well cared for.
So also remember they're protected, not granted.
Mhm.
Stop at that. Just wait for someone to make a motion.
I will make a motion, to approve with staff recommendations, except bumping the number 1 up to 6 inches for those 10.
Motion for approval with modified staff conditions for item 1. Is there a second? Second by Paul. All right, so then let's just go, I'll go individually. We'll say Calvin, yay or nay?
Nay.
Nay. Paul?
Aye.
Aye. George?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and I vote with the majority, so it's approved 4-1. Thank you. All right, so our next item on our agenda is gonna be item B1, which is 1 Country Club Drive. And that's James Island. The TMS number is 424-00-00004, is zoned SR1. I request a variance from section 54-327 to allow the removal of 19 grand trees. Request a special exception from section 54-327 to allow the removal of 2 grand trees. I request a variance from section 54-330 to allow the reduction of the impervious construction setback near the bases of 15 grand trees.
So as you see here, the application has been requested to be modified to just 5 grand trees, withdraw the special exception, and carry on with the reduction in the tree protection zone. This is the applicant, owner being the Country Club of Charleston, Kimberly Horn being the applicant. Their letter addressing the variance test. So the Country Club of Charleston, I can't remember the exact acreage, but it's the golf course down by Wapoo Creek and Ashley River and Country Club 1. Aerial shot. So this is the overall request for the original 19, and 2, the special exception had to be withdrawn because the trees were misidentified. They're live oaks, not water oaks. And then the golf course took a hard look and decided that 5 trees were to be asked for removal. And then the yellow trees, I know it's very hard, but I'll blow up some sheets.
Thank you. Thank you.
The yellow trees are, I believe it's 14 to be slightly impacted, and a couple of them or a few are impacted just because they're actually going to improve conditions around the trees by removing the concrete cart path, and then others with slight, very slight grade changes and some irrigation work. So this was the original layout. It's very large, so we break it down. This I'm going to kind of skip over because the trees aren't, well, we do have one yellow tree there. So I think it's a new bunker, some just small bunker work will have to be done there. Again, this doesn't pertain. Actually, well, actually, this does capture hole number 8. So that yellow tree just to the left of 8 is one of the 5. But then again, some of the yellow trees just slightly impacted with cart path removal and some T or bunker work. This shows the 4 trees. Again, this is just the way they broke up their sheets, but we'll revisit these 4 trees to make the total of 5. And the reason being is that they have to construct these trees sit in new tee boxes. Again, this is off the, but just showing how some trees are being impacted again, just by very minimum grading and irrigation work. And again, a few yellow here. So I'm going to zip through these trees because they don't count, and we'll get to the revised exhibit. So request revised for 5 grand trees. So they kind of modified their document. Again, it's kind of hard to see in this configuration, but we'll, the 4 are the lower circle, and the 1 standalone is the middle circle there. So here's the plan. I wanted to zoom in and kind of give you an understanding. Technology has changed over time. People are hitting the ball further. This course is slated to host the tournament in 2028. So there's some things that the club would like to adjust in prep for not only that, but also to help the course return to its original design. So we'll get into that, but these are 4 trees here. And then this tree, the green is doing a major shift in just the play of the whole. This tree would be kind of in the middle of the play. So starting with tree 322, 36-inch live oak, you can see it sits on the green. There's a couple photos there. And then some close-ups. Tree 333, 36-inch live oak again on a tee box. You can see the photos, the root system, and then some close-ups. Tree 334, again, tee box, photos, and some close-ups. Tree 335, 32-inch live oak, again on a tee box or in a tee box. And it's close-ups. And I believe it's 338, a 26-inch live oak next to the existing pond. Cart path comes out and the hole kind of gets shifted and would be in play in the middle of the fairway. And a close-up. I'll let the applicant explain a lot that's going on relative to course and their vision for the future of the course and the work that's ahead and what have you. So I'll let them. And then staff is recommending approval with the condition plan 170. That's 100% of the DBH inches lost with native canopy trees to be planted on the golf course property. Use 4-foot chain link fences, tree protection barricades during the course renovation and work that needs to be done. Must submit a tree preservation plan developed by the project certified arborist to be approved by the city, addressing all best practices methods. That's pruning, root pruning, mulching, etc. Must provide a landscape plan for technical review committee review and approval. They'll they'll need a land disturbance permit for this project. It's that large. And then must demonstrate a good faith effort for the live oak wood to be repurposed.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. I'll start again. Is there anybody present that is opposed to this application? Okay, and,
Like to hear what they have to say since it's been changed.
okay, applicant is present.
Yes, sir.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. My name is Robert Sumner. I'm a board member at the Country Club of Charleston. I'm also the chairman of the Green Committee. So it's my responsibility to manage the project that is at the heart of this application. I want to tell you a little bit about the project itself. The purpose of the project is to rebuild all of the greens and bunkers on the golf course, to dredge and reshape, or I should say, refine the shapes of the ponds on the golf course, regrass the entire course, and to restore the course to its original 1925 design. The course had its 100th birthday this year, something that we're very proud of. We have worked diligently as a club over the last 3 years. We have a green committee and a master plan committee, and we've spent untold hours working on this with architects, engineers, arborists, our local, our golf course superintendent, and others in an effort to try to make sure that every detail of this project gets the attention that it deserves and that it's maintained in a responsible way. To that, I will say we've worked with Eric and his team, and I want to thank them for the time they've spent. We've had several meetings, as well as we walked the golf course together and went tree by tree and talked about the reasoning behind the changes that we're requesting. And I appreciate very much staff's approval of our request for variance of 5 trees. One key hallmark of this project that I think needs to be emphasized is that we have always from the beginning maintained total transparency to the members of the club, as well as the adjacent homeowners in the neighborhood nearby. About 45 days ago, we had a town hall meeting at the country club, and 200 members came and listened as I presented all the details of the project, including specifically going through tree by tree by tree. And I'm pleased to tell you, we sent out an email, made myself available, and I've yet to hear from a single person that's opposed us. Also, we've been in close contact with the HOA and various homeowners nearby. And what I should do, if we can we access that the PowerPoint?
Yes. With some assistance.
I got going too fast. I do have a few slides prepared just to help with the conversation.
Okay.
But while they set it up, I'll explain sort of the preface to this. Is we've been in contact with nearly every one of the property owners that live along the property line that is affected by these trees. The property line includes hole number 3, as well as the tee box area of number 16 and the green of number 15. And we've talked to nearly every one of those property owners, and I'll show you a map with check marks that shows you exactly who has either sent in letters of support to you guys on the board, or they have given me express permission to represent to you their consent for this project. And I think that's speaks volumes to the project in my mind, because we have the property owner, the country club that is in favor of cutting the trees, and our members are as well. But we also have the affected property owners who have also offered widespread consent. We've also spoken to the HOA president, who's here tonight, who I believe also is ready to offer his consent to the proposed plan.
Like for the sheets here. Okay.
I'll go ahead and we can just go right to slide number 3, please, Eric. All right, this
I'm sorry.
so this you can see on this particular slide, you can see the 5 red circles that represent the 5 trees that we'd like to cut. And you can also see through the GIS images, the various properties that are nearby or adjacent to these trees. And the check marks represent each person that's either written in a letter or offered their consent verbally to us and authorized me to represent that to the board. So we think that's important. And so tonight, we're here to ask you guys for a variance because we'd like to remove 5 grand trees. And so in order to obtain a variance, we have to satisfy the hardship test. I'd like to speak to each of the 4 factors. First, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this property. This is a unique and a historic golf course. And here, if we could slide forward to slide number 5, please. Let's go one more. What makes this so unique is this golf course property was purchased in 1924. And in 1925, the course was designed and built by famous golf course architect Seth Rayner at the direction of very famous landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. You may know the Olmsted brothers designed Central Park in New York. Seth Rayner, who trained and worked under the father of American golf, a guy named C.B. McDonald, is widely regarded as one of the greatest golf course architects in the history of this country. And we're lucky to have a Seth Rayner golf course in this town. Many people in the golf community consider this to be the best preserved Seth Rayner golf course in the country. And so because of that, we have people who come from across the country and frankly, from other countries because they want to see and they want to play this very historic course. And for that reason, this golf course, this golf club takes its responsibility to the community very seriously. It's part of the fabric of our membership that we want to share this golf course. And so because of that, we have a legacy of hosting national, international, and local golf tournaments as a way to share this with the community. You may recall in 2019, the country club hosted the United States Women's US Open. It was a big deal, it was televised, and it was widely regarded as the best US Open that women's golf ever had. We're also proud to announce that we will be hosting in 2028 the United States Mid-Amateur Championship. And that is an amateur tournament, but it is hosted by the USGA, and it is one of the top tournaments in the country. Again, I think it will bring a lot of esteem to the course and also to the community. And with that in mind, not only do we think we have a responsibility to the golf community to maintain and to make this golf course accessible, we also have a legacy of preservation. And what I'd like to do, if we could move forward to, yeah, there we go. Slide number 6. What I want to point out on this slide is on the left-hand side, you've got our earliest aerial photograph of the golf course from 1938. And on the right-hand side, you have an aerial from just this week. And the biggest distinguishing factor that you can tell when you look at this is there were virtually no trees on this golf course when it was built in 1925. And even as of 1938, there weren't very many. And you can see today just how many trees the club has planted and just to what efforts the club has gone to create and maintain and preserve a beautiful landscape, which includes beautiful golf trees along the golf course. And if you could just pop to the next slide here, we have a number of great, beautiful grand live oaks along our property. I think Eric and his staff commented that we feed them well and we fertilize them well, and as a result, they thrive. And we take great pride in that, and we consider our trees to be an important part of our golf community. And so for that reason, we believe that this course and this property is extraordinary, it is exceptional, and frankly, there is nowhere else like it in Charleston, or for that matter, in the state of South Carolina. The second point, these conditions do not apply to other properties in the vicinity. And if we could go to the next slide, please. This is a cutaway that shows you again the image that we saw earlier with the 5 trees we're seeking removal on. If you look along the perimeter, you'll see that all of the adjacent properties are residential in nature. They're not golf courses, they're residential. And as a result, when you compare the historic background, the landscape architecture and the use of this property to those adjacent, there simply is no comparison. These conditions do not apply. With respect to the third element, we argue without a variance, the ordinance will prohibit and unreasonably restrict the use of the property. Make sure we got this. So on this particular point, I think I'll start with this. The trees do interfere with the course design, the course quality, and the strategy of play. And Eric mentioned this earlier. These trees interfere and are detrimental to the playing conditions on the golf course. Oak trees don't play well with grass. And where oak trees are planted, grass doesn't grow well. And because of that, these oak trees are deteriorating the conditions along the tee boxes on number 3 and number 16, and also deteriorating the conditions on number 8 along the pond there where that tree is planted. The next point, these trees are detrimental to the playing conditions. They really are interfering with our ability to, in particular, number 8. That tree is within the line of sight. If you're on the right-hand side of the hole, that tree, the canopy is starting to grow, and that canopy is now interfering with your ability to hit a shot to the green where it is. Now, Eric did mention we're going to make a shift of the green from the left-hand side. The reason for that is if you look along the left side, and I'll just use this as an example. This is the 8th hole, the tree we're seeking to remove, the 8th green, and you've got a beautiful stand of live oak trees that run along this ditch. The problem is those oak trees shade that green almost the entire day. And so because of that, the conditions of that green have deteriorated. And so we've decided to move them away from those trees in order to preserve that beautiful grove of trees. But in doing so, that tree on the right-hand side of 8 is coming more into play ever so slightly. These trees also interfere with the pond work we're trying to do. The pond work is integral because we don't have enough water. And so we're going to need to dredge the ponds and work on reforming the banks so that they don't erode in again. And in particular, that tree on number 8 sits right on the bank of the pond and really interferes with our ability to repair and improve number 8, because we rely on pond water as our only source for irrigation. And finally, the trees prohibit our ability to evolve. You know, golf is a unique sport, unlike any other. Every year, golf balls get better and technology gets better, and golfers hit the ball perfect. But the problem is golf courses don't grow with the technology. And so to address that, we are trying to make a few changes within the confines of the original design we're trying to return. We are trying to make some extensions. And the tee boxes on number 3 and number 16, we're actually trying to bring those back a little bit to get some additional yardage. And on number 3, we're trying to move the tee boxes ever so slightly away from the property line to create some room, to create a buffer between the golf course and those homes. And so for that reason, we believe that the golf course plan that we have provided, the project that we're seeking to begin in November, will help us to better utilize and better use our property, and without a variance, this would be an unreasonable restriction. And finally, we argue there is no substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good. As I mentioned earlier, we have widespread support from club members as well as the neighborhood. None of the 5 trees are of optimal health. They're all graded as Bs and Cs. And we kept that in mind when we reduced and pared down our list to 5. And if you could just go forward to the next slide. Again, sort of look at this historic photo from 1938. I'll remind you again, none of these trees were present when we bought the property. The country club planted these trees over the years without the benefit of the original plans from Seth Rayner and the Olmsted brothers. It was only after a great deal of historic research that we were able to uncover the plans and determine what it looked like from the beginning. This property in question is a beautiful golf course. I don't think anyone would argue differently. Granting this variance will permit us to restore and improve the conditions of this historic course and will only enhance the character of the neighborhood, this area, and the city of Charleston. And finally, I'll conclude with this. We are 100% on board with mitigation. Obviously, we just learned of the mitigation plan, but we are prepared to mitigate on site. We have 2.5 acres set aside for plantings, which we believe will be more than enough to address the recommendations from Eric and his staff. And we look forward to doing that. And in conclusion, it has been an honor of mine to be entrusted with this golf course project. It's been a labor of love. We've taken every effort we can to take this project seriously, and especially to make sure that we've been responsible with respect to the trees. We have significantly reduced our request for trees, and our variance is seeking the removal of 5. And so it is the goal of this club to preserve and restore the rich historic treasure, which is our golf course. And we appreciate your consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present that wants to speak in favor?
Good afternoon. My name is Rick Tani. I live at 1417 Burning Tree Road. If you look at this map, it's here, but it wasn't there at that time. There are 93 homes in the Country Club 2 subdivision, of which 22 are have property adjoining the course. One of them is mine. As Robert mentioned, I have also contacted and been in touch with most of the owners that are around the affected area. And without any objection or any concern, every single one of them supports this program. This project is critical to the upgrade and to the renourishment of our course. And our neighborhood is valued. The main driver of our neighborhood is associated with being in the close proximity and the lifestyle that we have being a part of the club. So therefore, we work very closely together on projects like this. We're in constant communication. And as Mr. Sumner said, transparency has been of the utmost importance and appreciated by the homeowners. So with that, I think it's quite clear that we have 100% support from our neighborhood, and we would like to recommend that you approve this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present that wants to speak in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Floyd Neal. I'm also a member of the Country Club of Charleston, but I'm also a Charleston County Board of Zoning Appeals member. So I sit in the chair for the county that you all sit in. So thank you for your service. And I totally understand this type project. And what I wanted to, the 2 points I want to make briefly tonight, because I don't want to waste your time, is I want to back up what Mr. Sumner has said about the process that they went through. When they went through and got their engineers and their whole process, originally it was 26 trees and it just became too much. And I got involved, not at my direction, just they were asking my opinion because of my role with the Board of Zoning Appeals for the county, and they reduced it and they opened up to the membership and described everything to them. So a lot of times in the county, I'll see applications that come in with 20 trees or 10 trees, and we have to whittle it down to 5 or 6 because they're asking a real greedy application, give me everything I can get. Well, they've already done that. They've whittled this down. They did the legwork for you. They've gotten it from 26 down to 5. So everything they need is the 5. And a perfect example of that description is what Mr. Sumner just presented on number 8. They could leave the green right where it is, and it would be fine. And that tree that he's asking for, one of the 5, doesn't need to go down. It's got some pond work that needs it. But then the green would be deteriorating, and he'd have to come back and ask for a variance for 5 or 6 or 7. So that's part of the 26. So they really took it into consideration. They got all these maps, all the historical documents, and made the best plan and put it forward. Then they got the membership on board, and then they went door by door to all these homeowners and got the homeowners association on board. So that's a critical question I ask every time at a county board of zoning meetings. Is all the homeowners that are directly affected involved, do they know about it? And they've got 100%. So I wanted to make sure that point was made, that they've done the legwork on this project, and I'm proud to be a small, very small part of it. The last thing is the mitigation. Their mitigation, they've got room to do whatever is needed. If it's 170 inches, they'll put it out in a responsible way. If the city needs some monies to go into the tree bank instead of mitigation on site, I'm sure that they would work out whatever y'all recommend as additional comments or things that special exceptions for the project to go forward. So I appreciate your time and letting me present.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
All right, anybody else present that's in favor that wants to be heard? And then I'll say, is there anybody opposed?
Partial. I'm Pam Ferguson. I live on James Island. And I am greatly relieved that the plan has changed. And I feel like you have put a lot of thought into it. Just to clarify, so initially it looked like 21, but so are those other 17 trees remaining? Or they just changed status?
Remain.
They're being, that's great. Couple of items. I do appreciate there's far more planting than in 1938. In 1938, there were far more trees on James Island. So these grand trees are more precious than ever because of the loss of the trees that we've had. It does sound like you've really thought through it. I was questioning on number 8 if trimming the canopy would be enough. I know you mentioned the drainage. Maybe that's just a thought, but I don't know. The other thought that I had, and maybe this is already part of it, the trees that are going to be replanted, are those mandated to be native trees or could it be any trees?
Yes, native.
Cool. All right, that's really it then. You know, I wish that those trees could stay. I have a feeling they're not. But I do appreciate the thought that you have put in and the fact that you cut it down. That it means a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
I do want to just state and just be fully transparent that I stated it for the last application, but we received 90, in total 92 written comments, 66 in opposition, 26 comments in support. If you were to read through them and identify addresses, it's you know,
Got it there.
all over James Island, West Ashley, what have you, and then I suspect the support letters are maybe more closely tied to the course or in proximity to the course.
Yes.
And then, you know, emails just continue to come in. So there were a couple others here that I have the emails attached, and they were in opposition, but just a couple added that you have there. So.
All right, thank you.
Just to address 2 quick points, and I appreciate your kind consideration of our application. You know, this, by all accounts, going back in 1925, this was always historically farmland. And so that character was maintained for a long time until the country club started planting trees, which occurred mainly between 1970 and into the 1990s. And so that's the point we wanted to make there. With respect to number 8, and trimming the canopy, we do trim canopies and we try to do that responsibly. The tree on number 8, where it's situated next to the pond, I don't think number 1, trimming the canopy would not alleviate the problems and our inability to do the pond work, which is so integral to the irrigation of this golf course. We need more water. It's so dry, and those ponds, they need to be dredged, and the sides need to be reformed so that they can hold water and not erode in on themselves. But also this tree, I don't know if we have an image of it, but I don't believe it would be particularly well. I don't think it would take, a tree canopy very well. It's not a tremendous tree. It's not like a live oak that's got a 100-foot canopy. I'm happy to address any questions that anyone has. If you prefer I sit or I can stay at the podium.
If you stay there just for a second, but if there's nobody else that wants to speak, then we'll close the application to the public and be open just to the board. And
You had a slide that showed green check marks,
Yes,
and there were a couple that were blank. Are those just homeowners that did not respond?
that's right. We just weren't able to get in touch with them.
Okay.
So we didn't have a response one way or another. As Mr. Tani mentioned, I'll echo his respects. I have not yet received any objection from the neighborhood. And so those were just folks, were likely out of town on vacation. As we were trying to, make sure and, get as much support as we could.
Thank you.
all right, so I'll just have to address it. Stated, and I agree, technology is better, the golf balls are better, the clubs are better. Why does my game still suck?
I wish we could help with that.
So,
Give us lessons.
yeah, so, no, thank you. If there aren't questions and sit, we can have discussion. I think that, again, it makes sense to me. I love presentation was good. The ability to reduce that request from 19 plus 2 down to 5 only shows a real sincere effort to do the least amount as necessary.
Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate your consideration.
Trying to get back to.
Stop sharing.
If there aren't questions, I'll say there can be a motion.
I think it's interesting that it's two very different applications, and we don't compare applications, but in this scenario, the folks that are in support are actually right adjacent to the property, whereas the folks that are opposed don't,
They're not in that
they're all
community.
over. And I went through all the addresses actually. In fact, that might be something we could do in the future, is plot the addresses. Just that'd be, I think that'd be helpful.
How they won't work.
Yeah.
I also wonder,
Technology can do it.
That's why she's leaving.
I also wonder if it would be this many in opposition if it was 5 instead of the,
Sure, that initial number is
21.
striking.
yeah.
I dislike that there be trees, but I do appreciate that it's been reduced.
What is the redu-
What about a pond? Was it B or C?
C.
So
Yeah, let's see.
There are 3 Ds
Four
and 2 Cs. Performance.
what is the actual reduction of the impervious setback?
So we could go tree by tree, but basically, as we toured the course, it's getting in with machines, light machines, just to remove concrete cart paths. So before they can, they'll modify the tree protection, but they're inside the TPZ. The other ones, there's a couple areas where they're just modifying some greens and that sort of thing, and irrigation lines.
Have you required any type of mat or any?
So we're going to require a 4-foot chain link fence. It will be quite a few chain link fence corrals out there. And then they're going to work with a project certified arborist to come up with a tree preservation plan and talk about all the best practices around those trees, root pruning, root barrier, pruning, mulching, that sort of thing.
Where's the 2, or I guess where would you be planting? Where's the 2 acres in relation to the course that you have for available for planting? Are you putting any trees back in?
And so if we could go back, Eric, to our presentation.
That's going to be a little difficult, but maybe this will work.
Yeah, this will work. So this is the front side of the golf course, the poles number 5, 6, and 7. We have approximately 2 acres in here. And it's hard to see, it's so blurry, but there's a lot of open area there next to a pond. And then coming up number 9, here on the right-hand side, you can see an open area there. And so combined, it's between 2, maybe a little bit north of 2.5 acres But we believe we had already estimated approximately 160 inches of required replacement. I think we have more than enough on site to do that.
Rob, you mind if I say something real quick?
Yeah, please.
Just one real quick. Sorry. My name is Andrew Topberg. I'm a landscape architect with Kimley Horn. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I just wanted to mention a very quick thing on that. So the key part about the mitigation is now that the club has the historic plans, they won't have to make the same mistakes that they made in the 70s and 80s when they didn't realize what the plan was to have it restored. So they won't have to come back here, in another 20, 30 years and say, hey, we planted all these by mistake. So I think that's a key point, is that they're able to move forward with the plan, knowing what they want this course to be maintained in the future. And so just want to bring that one up.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion for approval of staff recommendation.
Follow a motion for approval with staff conditions. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
And Kelvin seconds that motion. So we'll just do this as a group. All in favor? Aye in favor. Any opposed? Motion's approved 5-0. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you all very much.
And with that, I guess meeting is